Hello everyone, welcome to the lecture on Culture, Communication and Nation. This lecture is part of your paper on Media, Culture and Society. This lecture is about one of the important means of communication, which is culture. In this lecture, an attempt has been made to show that despite the cultural differences prevalent among people in a nation, communication still takes its course through cultural interaction that results in the formation of a national culture, thus reflecting oneness among people otherwise belonging to diverse cultural groups. Generally, people always engage in constructing their own ways of understanding the world they live in, and this reflects the changing nature of cultures. This means that culture can never be homogeneous, but it is constructed based on the needs of the people who want to attach a meaning to their respective lives. However, these meanings are always in a flux due to the intercultural communication, which can be understood as a process where people from different cultures fuse despite their differences to give rise to a new culture which becomes common among all at the national level, thus resulting in the formation of a national cultural identity. Thus, it can be said that while communication can offer an understanding of our cultural world, however, it concurrently denigrates the awareness. Communication positions us in a nation, however, it does not act as a medium for our representation in a nation. Beckett and Merrick quoted that in naming the world, we name ourselves. In explaining the world, we explain ourselves. In defining the world, we define ourselves. In the light of this, the understanding of culture imagines that people are essentially relational beings having the potential to strive for oneness. This denotes that people are fundamentally cultural beings who always engage in constructing and deconstructing as well as reconstructing different cultural forms. In the backdrop of this, the present lecture will emphasize that people from different cultures engage in intercultural communication despite the cultural differences, and it is because of the reckoning of such cultural differences that the process of intercultural communication remains a success. This lecture will offer an understanding of the concepts of culture, communication and nation, as well as the process of communication that takes place between various cultures. The lecture further offers an insight into the formation of a national culture through the process of interaction between various cultures, a process which is called as intercultural communication. Since the dawn of human civilization, especially by anthropologists, culture has been one of the important factors used to understand the nature of societies and the ways in which societies communicate with each other. Anthropologists were of the opinion that culture affects the overall patterns of human in any society. Culture, according to Stuart Hall, is always shared by the members of a society. It cannot exist on its own. Thus, the culture, being human-made, always creates a sort of confusion among scholars to define the term. However, those who attempted to define it differ in the ways which others have tried to define it. Hofstede, for instance, defines culture as the collective programming of the mind that distinguishes the member from one group or category of people from the others. Also, Sir Edward Taylor defines culture as that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of the society. These definitions suggest that culture is something which is beyond what we call as human nature. Human nature can be sensational, involving the aspects of love, fear, anxiety, which are common among humans. However, as defined by Taylor, culture does involve the factors which define the living patterns of humans, such as language, art, faith, customs, etc. Now let us try to understand communication. As the name suggests, communication means sharing. But what is that which is to be shared? Rao and Thomber started that by communicating we essentially share meanings. This act of communication encompasses behavior which an individual and a group enact, sustain, mediate, correct, and integrate to build relationships with. It becomes an integral tool with which we influence ourselves and others, bring changes in our attitudes and others' attitudes, motivate the people around us, and establish and maintain the relationships with them. Thus, communication becomes the glue that holds us together. Thus, communication is a process involving at least two people who act as the sender and receiver in sharing their ideas and feelings among themselves, which may or may not affect their minds. However, pertinent to mention that communication does not at the time involve an interaction between two persons or a group of people. Most of the times communication occurs through observations only, where people attach meanings to their observations. Communication can therefore be understood as the practice of producing meanings and the ways in which systems of meanings are negotiated by the participants in a culture. Now, let us discuss and try to understand the term nation. Defining the term nation is yet again a difficult task, owing to the cultural diversity of a country like India. Nation as a concept emerged in the academia since last more than 2 centuries. Scholars across disciplines tried to investigate how nation as a concept or an idea works as a unifying factor in a society on one hand, or splits them into parts on the other. According to Raphael Utz, nations have been regarded as the soul, a spiritual principle, or a moral conscience by the 19th century scholars, who also believed in the antiquity of the nation and interpreted its rise merely as a collective process of becoming aware of one's own nationality. The term used by Raphael Utz advocates the idea of collectivity or the group as the underlying notions of a nation. The idea of collectivity becomes from the group one belongs to. The group can be either any kind of group, such as family, school, or any other group characterized by the social, religious, or linguistic factors. While there may be difference in the ways scholars think about these factors, in the sense that whether they form the basis of a nation or not, yet these factors are believed to reflect a sense of belonging, which is a fundamental aspect of nation. This pushes us into what is commonly termed as intercultural communication. We will now discuss the process of communication among various cultures. Communication across cultures until mid-20th century, understanding India as a multicultural society was never important as it is in this 21st century. Several factors can be mentioned to understand the multicultural aspects of the Indian society. One of the reasons behind this is globalization coupled with advancement in technology. Globalization, which emerged as a concept based on the notions of globalization, came as a mechanism to merge or unite various cultures that exist in India. People from various cultural backgrounds arrived at a common platform where they met each other, shared their cultures, and this process intensified with the passage of time. They started realizing that culture is a key component in understanding human behavior, and this understanding of human behavior is made possible through cultural communication. Thus, it can be said that culture is crucial to the way people communicate with each other. In the light of this, the intercultural communication can be defined as the communication that occurs between people or groups of people belonging to different cultural backgrounds. According to J. Allwood, the sharing of information on different levels of awareness and control between people with different cultural backgrounds, where different cultural backgrounds include both national cultural differences and differences which are connected with participation in the different activities that exist within a national unit. We have entered into an era where skills concerning intercultural communication have become more than merely being recognized as assets. They have in fact become a requirement now. People from across the nation belonging to different cultures interact or meet, and this process has never been so easy as it is now and is still on the rise. Such an amalgamation of various existing cultures in our country is largely the product of technological advancement, which ensures quick, easy and economic friendly movement of people to even distant locations within the country. This is the mechanical aspect of interaction among people with different cultures. The other is based on communication system, which again is the result of the technological advancement. However, the means of communication or the instruments or devices are different in terms of two aspects. Through the latter, people from across the country and even at the international level now communicate with each other through certain mediums such as telephone, mobile phones, email, etc., besides other internet-based avenues, which render the services of communicating with each other. Such advancement in the communication system through technological advancement has resulted in an increase in the economic as well as social integration of people at national, transnational and international levels. This also increased the curiosity among scholars across various disciplines to comprehend the cultural differences and also facilitated intercultural communication. Alongside the intercultural communication results in what is called cultural cooperation amongst various cultural groups. Cultural cooperation is considered to be a fundamental need in a culturally diverse nation like India for its growth. Cultures have greatly influenced people in various ways. Intercultural communications have resulted in cultural change in the sense that people started learning, have resulted in cultural change in the sense that people started leaning towards other cultures or tried to assimilate part of other cultures into their own culture. This is made possible through the process of communication whereby different cultures interact and fuse, which leads to what is called nation building. This means that communicating through cultures creates awareness among people who believe that cultural connectedness or cultural cooperation will result in the similarity of the meanings that they give to their lives, and this eventually results into the convergence of diverse cultures into a unified world culture. Intercultural communication largely depends on the capabilities or skills of persons involved in such cultural communication, who admire or value others' cultures in the way they value their own, and also have patience to bear with any differences between one's own cultures and other cultures. Jant identified 4 factors which he believes make a person competent for intercultural communication. These are personal strength, communication skill, psychological adjustment, and the last is cultural awareness. The first, which is personal strength, involves the way a person views himself and his willingness to overtly and aptly disclose information about his culture. The second is skills for communication, which requires, as Jan believes, that in order for a person to be efficient communicator, he must be able to deal with variety of people in diverse situations. The third is the psychological adjustment, which is vital for a person to overcome the cultural shock in the form of stress, nuisance, or hostility while he encounters a new cultural environment. The last is cultural awareness, according to which a person is required to get acquainted with the social system and other customs before he becomes interculturally competent. These 4 factors lead to the formation of cultural consciousness, which is vital for the creation and development of a nation as well as constructing a national ideology. Alongside, they also result in what can be termed as national culture, which is a blend of various cultures and is formed due to cultural interaction. Thus, in the contemporary times, we are born into a culture which is considered as the national culture. This bestows an individual with an identity which is more of a national identity than the identity formed through in a narrow sense. According to Ernst Gellner, the idea of a man without a nation seems to impose a great strain on the modern imagination. Having a nation is not an inherent attribute of humanity, but it has now come to appear as such. The foregoing debate about cultural communication and nation pushes one into asking about the role of intercultural communication in nation building, which relies on cultural awareness among people. This is seen especially when people from different cultures interact and the interaction is seen to be successful. Such an intercultural communication results in the changes in cultures due to cultural interaction. According to Packek and Myrick, culture always changes because of internal and external influences. Communication in that sense is the most important quality for anyone to work on if they want to work or be a part of the intercultural society. Intercultural communication is a symbolic, interpretive and transactional contextual process in which the degree of difference between people is large and important enough to create dissimilar interpretations and expectations about what is regarded as competent behaviors that should be used to create shared meanings. Therefore, whether culture can be looked upon as a nation, faith, language, gender or anything else, all carry or resemble one thing in common, which is, as Anderson has stated, imagined community. This indicates that while people of some culture imagine themselves, however, they are at the same time imagined upon by others as being the group members. This also implies that the culture is not something that pre-exists in our societies, but it is a discursive construction. The general notion that everyone in a society is similar is null and void. Differences always exist among people in any society. At the national level also, there can apparently be cultural variations, for instance in terms of gender, language, social class, ethnicity and so on. Cultures are comparatively stable and do not change easily unless there is some influence either external or internal. However, despite the differences on these groups, there can still be cooperation among various cultures, and such cultural cooperation is ensured by the intercultural communication. In this lecture, we have discussed the basic concepts of culture, communication and the nation, and how various cultures interact through the process which is called intercultural communication. Besides, we have also discussed how communication takes place through culture, which further results in the amalgamation of various cultures, thus giving rise to cultural connectedness, a process which signifies cultural openness. Also, this cultural oneness creates a sense of belonging among people of different cultural groups within a nation, and how this sense of belonging leads to the formation of national culture. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. For more details, please read the modules very carefully and attempt the questions given at the end. Thank you.